Well, in today's 5-Minute Gardener, picking the right pot for the right plant. There's so much to choose from. Our 5-Minute Gardener, Debbie Mounts from Harlow Gardens, is here to make it easy to have a patio full of beautifully potted plants.
Okay, good afternoon. You come into the nursery and you're looking for a pot. And you say, okay, which pot do I use? You come to me, you say, Debbie, which pot do I buy? Well, there's a lot of things I'm going to show you that are going to help you make a decision about which pot to buy. Now, the first question probably you should address is, do you want to use plastic like this pot, or do you want to use a heavier clay pot? You know, just a plain terracotta or some of these glazed pots like I have here. Now, the main reason to use a plastic pot is really about the weight and the cost. They're going to be less expensive and they're going to be easier to move. Now, if you're going to go on to the fancier pots like I have here, I have this beautiful variety of pots. Any one of these pots can work in your garden. They'll do beautifully. Now, the first rule, let's assume that I have this plant in my house. This is, by the way, this is a Chrysandra. And I have this plant in my house, and it's getting kind of root bound. It needs a bigger pot. Your first rule of thumb is you only go about 2 to 4 inches bigger than the opening of the existing pot. So I have this beautiful little Talavera pot here, and this is perfect. This is a 6-inch pot, and this little Talavera is about an 8-inch pot, and you only go that much bigger because that new loose soil can hold extra moisture, which can actually damage the plant if there's too much soil there. Now, the next question is, can I use a shallow pot? You can for some things. Like this pot here, this is a cacti, this is a succulent. They're fine in a shallow pot. They don't have really deep roots. They don't need necessarily that extra soil volume. The other question is, do I want to seal my pots? And you can seal your pots if you want to. I'll bring the sealer with me into the studio and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we'll also talk a little bit more about pot feet. Now, the last question is, does it have to have a hole in it? Now, these pots that I have here all have a good size hole in them. And the best thing to do for the plants is to get a pot with a hole in it. If you don't have a hole in it, it's really difficult to water them correctly. Okay, guys, I hope that helps.
It has helped a lot. Thanks so much, Debbie.
You're welcome.
And those were all glazed pots, I think, that you were showing us there. You brought one of these terracotta pots.
I brought a terracotta pot today. A lot of folks in the nursery will ask us, you know, should I seal the pot or should I not seal a pot, or which one of these pots won't fall apart? Now, all pots eventually are going to fall apart. Some of them have a longer shelf life, but certainly using a pottery sealer can help. And if you're going to use a pottery sealer, make sure and spray the hole, turn it upside down, spray the bottom, the hole, the inside, the outside. Usually you do 2 or 3 coats. And we've done a little experiment in the nursery, and it'll prolong the pot's life for probably a couple of years. It just depends how often it's watered and all of those good things.
Does it change the color of the pot?
Very slightly. Okay. It's very slightly darkens the color of the pot. If you have a glazed pot that still has the terracotta inside, even sealing the terracotta inside can help, but usually glazed pots don't need it. Okay. Usually they don't need it. Okay. The other thing I brought today are pot feet. They don't exactly look like our feet, but they work. You can use these often instead of a saucer, because sometimes pots that sit in a saucer, the water sits in the saucer and then it's drawn back up into the pot and has all our extra salts, which we have in our water, and it can damage the pot. So the pot feet work instead of a saucer. They let the water drain away from the bottom of the pot, and the reason for a saucer usually is to protect the surface, like on your patio, underneath the pot. This will do the same thing without damaging the plant.
Now, the only problem that I can see with the feet versus the saucer is that the water will run out of the plant onto your patio.
It will indeed. But what happens sometimes, especially if you water too much, it still runs out onto the patio.
True.
Or if you have a terracotta saucer, it will still bleed through and leave a ring on your patio. So it's just a decision that you have to make yourself, whatever works best for you.
Do you have any feeling one way or the other about pots that are made out of concrete?
Oh, they last a long time, but one of the things that people don't realize is concrete is a material that breathes, so it expands and contracts. So your concrete patios, you're almost always going to get some kind of cracking, or same thing in your pots. You will, in a big, we have some huge concrete pots at work that we've potted, and they have pretty good cracks in them, but we still plant them. They don't fall apart. They'll go for a really long time, even with cracks in them. So but that's not uncommon for concrete.
And I don't know if folks at home have found this to be the case with the concrete pots, but I have 2 of them at my front door, and they get that morning intense sun until about noon. Everything I plant in there just about can't live because the pot gets so hot.
Well, yeah, and the thing to do, what you can do with that sometimes is you can diffuse some of that heat by, when you plant, put a garbage bag on the inside of the pot before you plant.
Okay.
And it helps kind of buffer some of the heat.
Interesting. Would
And
you
it
still
holds the
put
moisture.
you'd still put a hole in the bag?
Yes, you'd still put a hole in the bag, and it helps hold some of the moisture in too.
Are there some plants that can strictly only go into pots, and some plants that you should never put in a pot?
No.
No, it doesn't really matter.
And I mean, I've even heard of people like back east who have really big citrus trees that have been in pots for 30 years because they have to live inside because of the cold and such. So really, generally, they will get root bound. The plant will get root bound. So you can slowly expand the pot and that plant will be happy. Or if you're courageous enough, you can take the plant out and root prune. The plant will kind of suffer a little bit for a bit, but it'll generally recover if you know how to do it properly. Then you stick it back in the same pot it was in.
And potted plants are just so handy, especially for older people who can't get down on their hands and knees to garden and stuff. And if you buy those little wheel things, those little
the
plates,
caddies,
you can move them wherever you need to move them.
Yes, or if you have a really small patio space.
Exactly.
And you still want a little bit of a garden, you can do your vegetable gardening, your herb gardening. You can put small trees in a pot. You can do the whole kit and caboodle all in pots.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
there's watering systems for pots also.
Wow. You can do contained gardening?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Without ever having a big piece of land.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much, Debbie.
You're very welcome.